This is how I tie my version of the Deceiver fly or a bucktail minnow. And I'm using a size 2 hook. It's kind of like a bass fishing hook. But we're going to get some starburst fibers in the color pearl from flytyersdungeon.com. And then we're going to put it loosely in, one loose wrap, then one tight wrap. And then you just tighten it, make sure it's not going anywhere. Then you're going to pull those fibers back, and that's going to kind of be like a tail, which will blend together into the fibers of the bucktail once you get that on later in the fly. Then you're going to take some hairline bruiser blend. This was just meant to make it more thick and have more body. You absolutely do not need to put that in. I just like to add it in there. Next, you're going to get some Mylar. I actually cut this up. This was from Walmart. It was like a door cover with those strips coming down, and I just bought the door cover and cut them up into little strips and put them in a baggie. But you could actually buy some real Mylar from a fly shop if you wanted to get ripped off. Take some glue, put it on the shank, and then wrap the Mylar up the shank. And this is going to give a really nice kind of reflective and translucent body look on your fly. Make sure that it's secured. You can wait a little while that glue dries. I took some resin here, some UV resin, clear, thin finish, and then you're going to hit it with the UV light. I'm rotating it at the same time as when I'm doing the light on it so that it doesn't get too wonky, because if you leave it in one position, it'll drip. Next, you're going to get your bucktail, and I'm going to flip it upside down because the bottom of the fly is the white part. Minnows have like a white belly, and so you want to use your white bucktail on the bottom part, because where the hook bend is, that's the heavier part of the fly. So that's most likely what's going to be the way that it's going to sink, is with that part down. So you're going to take less than the width of like a pencil's amount, and less is better than too much because you can always add more. So take some, strap it on there, try to measure it to be a little bit longer than the shank of the hook, and that's how you're going to tie it in. Then you're going to get some crystal flash. I got just one strip. You can put in more if you want your fly to be super flashy. I cut it into 4 different strips by halving it twice. And then you're going to tie that in loosely at first and then tighter. And I think what I do here is, instead of snipping off the tag ends, I just flip it over and tie it back in, because it'll get lost in those bucktail fibers. You can do either. I've seen people do all kinds of different stuff. My flies aren't about beauty, they're about function. I don't think the bass are going to care whether the crystal flash is exactly proportionate and perfect or not. Now you're going to take the brown side of the bucktail and flip the fly over, tie that in, and know that you can trim this up after the fact. Some people want to trim it up, make it super crisp. Some people will put it in a hair stacker to make it all the same length. I don't really care about that much. You come up with your own way. This is how I do it. Once you've got that in, you're going to trim it up a little bit, probably going to give it some extra wraps to make sure it's nice and in that tight little ball. Next, we're going to get some crystal flash in a tan color so that it will blend into the brown part of the fly. Again, if you want to use the same flash that you had from the bottom part that's white, be my guest. It'll still probably work in a very similar way. I just like putting the tan in because of the way that I like the way that it looks. It's my favorite color of the crystal flash, actually, because it just looks so good. So next, what you're going to do to just kind of reinforce the strength of this fly is you're going to put glue all around that thread ball that you've tied up to make sure that it molds all that material together. Then you're going to take your super cheap Amazon eyes, your not fly bought from a fly store eyes, because then you're paying like $8 for like 12 eyes. Instead of that, get 500 eyes or 1,000 eyes for like $19.99 off Amazon. I promise you get a better deal that way. Even if you don't know the size, I usually get 5 millimeter, but get a range. Spend $30 and buy eyes for like the next 5 years of tying your flies, unless you're like an industrial fly tyer. But take a chance, buy a bunch of them. What you don't like, just save it for later. But I get all my flies off of Amazon or Alibaba, and it works great. Then you're going to get some resin, which is going to be the thick resin, and you're going to fill in the gap between the eyes so that it just looks nice and crisp and it's going to just take on the same color of whatever material is behind it. It looks super juicy and fishy. And then what I'm going to do is finish this fly off with the thin resin. So that's how I tie my deceiver fly or my bucktail minnow. And I really love using this for catching bass that are in middle to deeper water. You can put it still on a 5-weight with sinking line or floating line. It really produces for me here in Central and East Texas. And if you want to see how I fish it and see me catch a couple of fish with it, stay tuned and watch the rest of the video.
Just because that fish, I feel like I keep getting hit by the same fish.
So this clip, I am in East Texas on a lake called Skelly Lake. It's like 120 acres, and I'm using a 5-weight rod with a floating line, and I'm just retrieving pretty slow. If I were in Town Lake in Austin where the water's a little bit clearer, I'm actually retrieving it faster. What I'll do is initially I'll let it sink for a little while, and then I'll retrieve it really, really fast, especially if I'm in a place where there's some running water to try and get kind of a reaction strike. But here I was just kind of being lazy, retrieving it really, really slowly. And the lake's not very deep, so I didn't need to have any kind of sinking line or anything special. But first of several bass that we caught, just so much fun using this bucktail fly. So one of the things that's always a struggle for me when casting these bigger flies, especially on my 5-weight rod, is that a lot of times I'll be impatient and try to throw it back out too quickly, and then my line will just drag in the water because I didn't time my back cast well enough. And these heavier flies for bass, and I feel like this is sacrilege for trout fishermen, but down here in Texas, we don't really have trout, at least not where I am. And so I'm throwing these bigger flies if I'm trying to catch anything bigger than like a couple of inches. So just remembering that when you're throwing this heavier bucktail deceiver fly, going slower rather than faster works better with the rhythm, and eventually you'll learn the flex of your rod correctly with this fly. But that's kind of the main thing about getting this fly into a rhythm is super important for making long casts. Otherwise, you're just going to be pissed the entire time and it won't be fun. So really focus on your rhythm on this one.
Not very big.
If you got anything out of this video, hopefully you tied this fly and you caught a bunch of big fish on it. Let me know in the comments. Do you think you can tie a better version? Is mine terrible? Is mine great? I'd love to find out. Give me a subscribe, thumbs up. Everything helps. I really appreciate you watching the channel. Have a great day.
Nice job.